Behind me sits two of the most bad to the bone fat tire electric bikes that have ever hit the market. On the right, obviously we have the Magician Alpha 72 volt, and on the left is the Wired Scout 72 volt. Both of these bikes are capable of hitting north of 50 miles per hour.
48, 49.
And they are both freaking awesome electric bikes. And if you've been looking at the spec sheet comparing the two, which one to buy, you might think they're basically the same. They are not basically the same, not even close actually. They ride very, very different. So in today's video, I'm gonna kind of break down some of the top level differences, and then we're gonna get them out for a ride and see how they are different to ride. So one of the biggest differences between these two bikes is gonna be the price. I do have a discount link down below the video for both of these bikes, which will reduce the price. After my discount code and shipping and taxes, you're gonna end up paying about $528 more for the Wired Scout compared to the Magician Alpha. $2,763 for the Magician Alpha, $3,292 for the Wired Scout. So high level similarities, both of these are giant electric bikes. They weigh somewhere between like 130 to 140 pounds each, although the Magician does have the Alpha Mini, which I will actually be getting any day now. Both of these electric bikes are 5,000 watts. They're both 72 volts. They both can go over 50 miles per hour, and they both look like normal fat tire electric bikes with pedals. And some of the differences. One is going to be motor noise and motor technology, very different. Torque delivery is very different on both of these bikes, and the fork angle as well as the rear suspension feel, and the resulting ride feel and smoothness. And the actual peak power is different, and then battery capacity size. So let's dive in a little deeper. So the very first thing I want to point out about these two bikes is the steering angle on the Magician Alpha is a little bit more steeper, and what this does is lead to a feeling of more stability while riding at speed. Now, this is not to say that the Wired Scout does not feel stable. Both of these bikes feel very stable, but the Magician Alpha definitely has just a little bit more of a feeling of stability when riding at high speed. Now, the downside to this is at slower speed maneuvers, the Magician Alpha isn't quite as quick to turn the steering wheel. So another thing I noticed when riding these two bikes is the Magician Alpha steering. It's like if you get it to a certain point, it kind of just wants to collapse and turn all the way to the side, which can be a little bit annoying. Whereas the Wired Scout, it'll pretty much stay wherever you leave it. Like you turn it a little bit and it just kind of stays exactly there. It's not trying to tip over on you. I will say that the steering on the Wired Scout does kind of feel a little bit heavier somehow. Another note on the suspension, you do get a little bit more travel on the Magician Alpha. It comes out to about 4¼ inches of travel as compared to the Wired Scout. You get about 3½ inches of travel. I will say I have not had trouble with either of the lengths of travel on either of these bikes. I have not bottomed out either one of these bikes. So let's talk about the tires. So on the Magician Alpha, they actually look like they're a little bit wider. They're not. They're both 26x4s. I think the profile of the tire is just a little bit more flat, whereas the Wired Scout kind of rounds over on the edge, which in theory makes more sense for, a smooth turn going around corners. The Magician Alpha tires, obviously with the knobby tread pattern, are great for riding on the sand. They grip into loose dirt and stuff very well. I like the tires on both of these bikes, but very different style. They both feel good riding on the street. They're both quiet tires. I think the Wired Scout tires make a lot of sense if you're going to be doing mostly street riding. So another minor point is you do get a little bit more distance between the fender and the battery on the Magician Alpha. So it's a little bit easier to get the battery out. Let me give you a quick little demo. Let's just go ahead and drop the Alpha battery out. So not too bad. Battery's pretty freaking heavy, but it comes out pretty easy. And over here on the Wired, if we pop the battery out, You can see just a little bit less room there. All you gotta do is just turn the wheel to the side. It's not a big deal at all, but just kind of pointing out the little details. So one more thing I wanna show you is the wheelbase of these two bikes. It is not the same, they are actually different. So both of the tires are on the back wall there. And from the back of the tire to the front tire, the Magician is probably about 1.5 inches longer. Looks like the Wired comes to be 80 inches on the dot. And the Alpha comes to right around 81.75, I would say. So up until now, we've really just been beating around the bush, bro. The real difference between these two bikes is the motor and the power delivery. So on the Wired Scout, or the Wired Warrior, whichever one you get, the Warrior is the high step variation of this bike. What we have is a Hentac 72 volt geared hub motor with steel reinforced gears. So essentially what this Hentac motor is a giant, extremely powerful, very torquey motor. And these steel gears have a sound to them. They are flat, straight cut gears. So similar to a race car that has straight cut gears, you get a similar sound on this bike. And I think it sounds awesome. It is extremely torquey, and I'm gonna tell you more about it while we're riding it. And the theory is these steel gears are more durable than what you find on the Bafang motor on the other bike over here, which I don't know if that's actually true or not, but it's a theory, because what we have on the Magician Alpha is composite gears, and it is a in-runner motor that is essentially 100% silent. So the motor on this bike is a very different technology in the sense that it sends its torque through the outside of the hub, but they deliver their power, their mechanical power, in a very different fashion. So essentially you kind of feel like less torque on the Alpha, but it's not like in a bad way at all. It's a much more smooth motor. Let me just let you listen to them. So we have basically one of the loudest geared hub motors that there is on the market. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have basically one of the quietest geared hub motors on the market, despite this being one of the fastest, most powerful motors on the market. Now there is a very, very different feel in the way these bikes ride, and I'm gonna do my best to explain that when we ride them. And as you can see, we have the step-through frame on both of these bikes, which is awesome for getting on and off the bike. But as you can see, they do things a little bit differently. The 4-bar linkage with the D&M air shock on the Wired comes up here. So you have the shock on the front, and it kind of, gets in that space of the step-through frame a little bit. And on top of that, it also blocks the seat post. So what Wired does is they give you two different seat posts. They give you a short one and a long one. I have the long one on there because I'm tall, but the reason they do that is because it can only drop down to there before it basically, this shock connects in there and it blocks its path. And the suspension, the rear suspension on both these bikes feels actually quite a bit different, which I'll tell you more about here in just a minute. Now, the latest iteration of the Wired bike, which, they've been making these bikes and perfecting them for years now, this whole assembly, the linkage, is quite a bit thicker than we've seen on previous iterations, and it feels very robust and sturdy. Should also point out it is the D&M AO8RC shock on the Wired bike. You get, you can adjust your air in that chamber right here. You get easy access rebound adjustment, as well as easy access compression, lockout. All that stuff is super easy to reach on the Wired bike. Now, looking at the Magician Alpha, you can see they do things a little bit differently. This shock is on the rear, and it gives more space for the step-through frame so that whole thing doesn't get in the way. And also the seat post can drop down more because that does not cross paths. The shock does not cross paths with the seat. This is also running a D&M shock, but you can see the rebound up there. That little red knob is quite a bit more difficult to reach and adjust. When you do want to adjust it, you do get a two-way click on this shock. So it's either open or closed. This is the D&M A038. Also sitting on a 4-bar linkage, you can see they do things a little bit differently. The clearances and tolerances on the Magician Alpha are pretty much on par with the Egyptian pyramids. Look at the tolerances and clearance on this thing. So the bearings and that whole linkage design is quite nice, I have to say. I really like it. And while we're down here on this variation of the Magician Alpha, which I don't know, they might have even changed this by now, but there's a single wall guard on this. So, I mean, it might be more possible to lose your chain when you don't have the double wall guard because the wired does have the double wall guard. However, what I would honestly love to see both of these bikes do would be to implement a narrow wide chainring, because that's really the ultimate for not losing your chain. I haven't lost the chain on either of these bikes yet. So there are quite a few more differences. Let's get into them. The rear battery pack on the wired is longer and it's a bigger battery. On the Magician Alpha, we have a 72 volt, 10 amp hour. The wired Scout, we have a 72 volt, 15 amp hour. Now, riding these bikes, I strongly prefer to ride either one of these bikes without the rear battery on. Rear battery situation is necessity only based for me. Only if I'm gonna go for a really long ride will I carry the rear battery on these bikes. And that is basically because of simple physics, bro. So what we got going on here is essentially a giant weight mounted up real high on the rear of the bike, which is just, in terms of physics, not a good place to put weight. It affects the handling negatively. And in addition to that, this is all sitting on the swing arm. So whether we're looking at the wired or the Magician, we got the same exact thing going on where we have a swing arm that has a huge motor on it. Both of these bikes have a very huge heavy motor. So that alone is not good for the suspension, because the best handling bikes are mid-drive bikes when they have the motor down here and a lightweight wheel. The less weight you have on the back of the swing arm, the quicker the wheel can pop up and down and be more compliant with the ride. It'll give you better suspension. So, one, you have a huge motor back here, and then two, you have a huge battery back here. So what I'm saying is you can feel the weight of both of these bikes if you're doing off-roading with that battery on there. It would be better if both of these bikes just put all the battery right up here, but the downside to that would be then you got a huge battery up here and it starts to look less like a bicycle and more like a motorcycle, because let's be honest, both of these bikes are basically motorcycles disguised as bicycles, electric bicycles, which that's the cool part. You can pretty much get by. These things just look like a normal e-bike for the most part. So, I get why they put the battery there, but in physics terms, there's better ways to sort it out. So Magician Alpha battery on the scale, I forget what it weighs, 12.2 pounds. And then wired Scout battery, 50% larger on capacity, 17.4 pounds. So the trade-off is for 5 extra pounds, you get 360 more watt hours of energy on the wired Scout. And then of course we have the main battery. So this is the Magician Alpha mainframe battery, which clocks in at 21.2 for the Alpha. And for the wired, it clocks in at 19 pounds on the dot. So the Alpha battery is physically a little bit larger. The numbers on it show 72 volt, 20 amp hour, S50 GB, beast of a battery. And then the wired Scout battery, exactly the same, 72 volt, 20 amp hour. That number comes out to 1,440 watt hours for both. Each of these batteries, same watt hours. And the wired Scout shows Samsung cells 50S, and these are high discharge cells. So I actually forget the weight of these bikes. My current weight is 199.8. Holiday season is here, bruh. Now, to be honest with you, I hate picking up either one of these bikes, but without the batteries, let's just see what it's like. So Magician Alpha, 301.8. So we're sitting at about 102 pounds on the Alpha with no batteries, and with no batteries on the Scout, 307.4. So 107.6 pounds on the wired Scout with no batteries. So obviously you get a little bit more battery capacity on the Wired Scout. There's a little bit more range in that battery because of the rear rack battery. And then the frame itself of the Wired weighs about 5 pounds more. Which on paper, I could understand looking at those numbers is like, yeah, what's the difference, bro? The difference isn't huge, but you can feel a difference. And this is especially true when riding with the rear battery attached to these bikes, because an extra 5 pounds basically mounted in the worst possible place you could put it, it's just not ideal. Now, obviously, you don't have to ride with the rear battery on either of these bikes. And then quick note on the handlebars, they are both BMX riser style bars. The Alpha bars are actually a little bit taller, not much, just a little bit taller. You can tell looking side by side. Few other notes here. You get the ergonomic style faux leather grips on the Wired. Here's your controls. Display is horizontal, and you get your quarter twist throttle on the right. On the Magician Alpha, you get these round rubber grips. For these high performance kind of bikes, I actually prefer the round rubber grips. Now, obviously you could put whatever grips you want on either of these bikes. These are nice for cruising and being comfy. For high performance scenarios, I feel like these are a little more suitable for gripping and holding on. You also get the quarter twist throttle on the Alpha, and as you may have seen in my full review of this bike, you get a physical switch to turn that throttle on and off, which is a wonderful safety feature to have. And on the Alpha, you get a vertical screen. Now, we talked about motor and battery, but we really didn't talk too much about controller on these bikes. The controller on the Wired Scout is a 65 amp controller compared to the 58 amp controller on the Magician Alpha. At 72 volts, 7 amps of current comes out to 500 watts more peak power on the Wired Scout compared to the Magician Alpha, which if you just look at that number alone, you might think, I gotta get the Wired Scout, but there's more to it, and I'm gonna show you. And now what I wanna do is just kind of hop on both these bikes side by side, back to back, or should I say front to front. So the Wired Scout, despite, this thing being in the way, it's not in the way. Like, you have your step through frame, it's great. They do have the high step, it's called the Warrior. You just have to lift your leg a little higher, or you have to swing around the back. Now, as you may or may not know, I am 6'5", so I might make either of these bikes look not as large as they are. These are both pretty large bikes, bro. And I have the rear battery off of both of them right now because it genuinely makes a difference in how heavy either of these bikes feel. With the weight high, you can really feel weight being mounted high up on these bikes with the rear battery on, which is why they're off. So hopping on the Wired Scout feels like a beast. Let's see my impressions hopping over to the Alpha. Right away, getting on this one, I can tell all this stuff is just more out of the way. Not a big deal, but yeah, dude, hopping on the Alpha, I have to say, this is my preferred feel. The way the rear suspension is, it just kind of feels like I'm dropping down into the bike. The handlebars come up a little bit higher, and the geometry of the Alpha with that more rake trail, whatever you want to call it, I'm not a suspension expert. Whatever they got going on there, it feels like I just kind of drop into this bike, and that rear suspension is very, very nice. The way it floats up and down, the bearings on the linkage, and how I have the shock tuned is nice. Let me get directly back on the Wired. Yeah, in a sense, it feels more like I'm on top of this bike in the way the suspension travels. It's very subtle, it's hard to explain, but this one almost kind of feels like more of like a sport bike kind of feel, like I'm getting on a CBR 1000. Not quite, but maybe because the handlebars don't come up quite as high, or maybe how the rear linkage and rear suspension is. But on the Wired Scout, I do love how when I turn the handlebars, they don't like flop to the side. For like low speed maneuvers, for low speed control and maneuverability, this is better. For high speed stability, this is better, but the downside to that on this one is, in theory, you don't have quite as quick control for precise movements. And then on the Alpha, when you get the steering to the side, after it gets to about here, I feel like it's always just trying to like flop over to the side. Again, not a big deal. I'm just trying to help you guys understand the nuances and differences in these two bikes so you can make up your mind, bro. Also, the stanchions on the X-Show shock on the Alpha are marginally thicker. Not that these ones aren't thick enough on the Wired. They have the exact same headlight. They both have a place to mount a basket on the front. There's a water bottle holder on the Alpha there. We could nitpick at these things all day long, but I say let's get them out for a ride and see how does it feel? The differences, how do these bikes actually feel different to ride? They are very different, bro. To tell you the truth, if I didn't review any other e-bikes, I would just ride these two every single day. They're the best because as a tall dude, they fit me very well. And they are the most exciting bikes on the market in this format. You know, 26x4 looks like an electric bicycle, is a motorcycle that probably is not going to be identified as a motorcycle by local law enforcement. No promises on that, but you know, they do have pedals. They do look like a pretty normal fat tire e-bike. Just don't get spotted going 50 miles per hour. Actually, I don't care what you do, bro. But let's get these things out for a ride. All right, dudes, let's get on the, I don't know which one first, but this is gonna be one of the most absolute fun times I've ever had riding e-bikes, getting to take both of these out on the same day. I did wanna also mention, you get 2 chargers with each of these bikes. The Wired is physically a little bit bigger. The charge rate is a little faster. You get 3.5 amps output charge on the Wired and 3 amp output on the Magician. So a little bit faster charge on the Wired, not much of a difference really though. I really don't know which one to take first, bro. Let's do Wired. So the front light on the Wired bike is real bright. You get the lights on the back too. Very bright lights on both these bikes. I think it's the same exact one. So we're gonna give it a go on the 20% grade here. Got it on pedal assist 5. I think start strength is only on 2. You gotta be careful on this bike, bro. Yep. Oh my God, dude. The amount of torque on this bike is just out of control, dude. Oh man. So I have to say, first and foremost, this bike is just absolutely dominated by its hub drive motor. The amount of power and sound this bike puts down. Woo! Oh, dude. This bike is crazy, dude. We don't even have it on the strongest start strength. On this bike, I feel like when I get on it, I'm trying to dial the power down instead of like crank it up for more. Woo! And we are running on single battery right now, so we don't have that rear rack battery on there. And this thing just handles so much nicer without that battery on the back. So I love the menus on this bike. It's super easy to get in there. You just hold down the set button. Everything is super intuitive. We have the throttle on max. And like I was saying, start strength is on 2. You could put it on 3 to make it softer or 0 to make it strongest. I just put it on 0. I don't even want to do this. 0 is ridiculous, dude. But let's just get like a 0 to 20. So ready, go. Oh my God, dude, front wheel came off the ground. You gotta be ready for it. Lean forward. And that's 30 already. Speed bump here. Woo! So you can just tell this motor is just absolutely dominated by those steel reinforced gears. Getting up to right at about 50, 49 on GPS, 50. So obviously this bike is incredibly fast, incredibly powerful, incredibly torquey. Oh my God. You know, if this e-bike was a car, initially in my review I said a Lamborghini, the Lamborghini of e-bikes. As I thought about it a little bit more, I might describe it as like a C7 Corvette Z06 in the fact that the amount of torque and power that it has, you can dial the power down, but just the way that torque hits on this bike reminds me of a C7 Z06 Corvette. It's just so raw. It makes all the noises. It just absolutely freaking rips. Now we have it on cadence sensor. Start 0, start assist 0, start strength 0 is just stupid. Like
it literally just picks the wheel up off the ground. If you see my shadow there, like this thing is like almost, oh, dangerous in its power delivery on start strength 0. Let's flip it to 3. So I'm gonna dial it down to the softest start strength, and then we'll flip it over to torque sensor too. So you can switch it, torque, cadence, very nice. So now on pedal assist 5, let's just roll on the throttle here and use a torque sensor. So the torque sensor on this one, it makes you work for it. It's not a bad thing at all because it's a little more safe than a cadence sensor, I'd say. So you can get on this bike and pedal it like a bicycle, and you just never forget you're on something serious when you hear those straight cut steel reinforced gears on this Hentech motor. So start strength 3. Oh yeah, that's much more gentle on the launch, so it's not just like picking the front end off the ground. So it feels more safe on pedal assist or start strength 3. Let's go try this hill. Oh yeah, on 3, it's almost like there's a bit of a delay too when you put it on 3, start strength 3. So honestly, you probably actually would want to be riding this thing on start strength 3 or 2, not 0. 0 is just crazy, dude. Let's try this hill. Ooh, yeah, 3 feels a lot more sane. Oh gosh, hit a pedal there. It's all right. So start strength 3. Let's just see how it does on this hill. We'll do the stopwatch and go. All right, so that about threw me off the back, even on 3. And wow, this thing pulls so hard, dude. Woo! This thing is crazy, bro. So to get up to here, right about here is 16 seconds. We'll try it on the Alpha here in a few. But my God, dude, this thing is so freaking torquey. Like, this is just absolutely dominated by its torque and sound, I would say. The pedal assist system, the torque sensor on this, it doesn't feel quite as refined and precise as the Alpha from what I can remember. We'll get on the Alpha in a few. But I guess when I ride the Wired Scout, this bike really feels like a motorcycle disguised as a bicycle. Like, I don't ever really feel too incentivized to actually pedal this bike, although the gearing on it is really good because I have it on gear 7, and it's like you can actually turn your legs pretty much at like any speed. So, you know, in the sense that like you could pedal this bike for like, just have it on pedal assist 5 and use the throttle for your power, and then pedal it just for the heck of it, you know, just turning your legs to get a little exercise, but not really like relying on the pedaling for actually doing anything. Is good in that sense. And no complaints at all on the suspension on this bike. The suspension is good, man. I like the 4-bar linkage, the air shock. Shocks on front are fine, they're good. And the tires on this bike, I really like the tires that come on the Wired. I think as these bikes keep getting faster and faster, we really need to be moving towards the direction of the tires that they have going on the Wired. They feel thick and meaty, like these don't feel like you're on like a flimsy bicycle tire. You know, you got the through axle on front too, which I think is super important for these high power bikes. The Wired has it, the Magician also has it. The screen on this one is great, easy to see your battery readout, easy to see your motor power. So with the steering fork, rake, trail, angle, whatever you want to call it, let's talk about the steering a little bit. So somehow it feels like a little bit heavy on the Wired, like the headset is like tightened down tight or something. I don't know, like it's got a little bit of weight to it. And even though the trail and rake on the Alpha would be more conducive for stability at speed, this bike, the Wired, does not feel unstable whatsoever at, you know, slower speeds or higher speeds. Like this bike never feels unstable. You have really good control. Everything feels really super solid on this bike. And then those 26x4-inch tires that kind of round over on the edge more, it feels, you know, pretty conducive to like leaning in and having like a smooth turn. All right, let's go get on the Alpha. All right, let's hop on the Alpha. Yeah, so hopping on the Alpha right away, you just tell you're on a whole different animal, dude. Oh, throttle's off. So let's roll out. So on the Alpha, I'm pretty sure that's the exact same light on front. It's extremely bright for both bikes. You got the light on the back. So let's give the Alpha a go up the 20% grade, back to back. Yeah, hopping on this bike. We're on climb mode, ready, go. So yeah, you can feel, okay, yeah. This bike just rides so different, man. The way the power comes on the Alpha is so much more smooth and silent compared to the wired Scout. So on climb mode, it cuts us off at 30 miles an hour. Let's bump it up to boost mode and turn off the headlight so we can see the display a little better. Oh yeah. So the first thing, obviously, what you notice on this bike is just how quiet and how smooth the power and sound is on this bike. So on boost mode, let's just go ahead and do a 0 to whatever rip, ready.
So what better way to race than to race myself? So starting at the exact same moment, I have the wired Scout on the right, Magician Alpha on the left, and I'll just show you how they accelerate on throttle only and what their power is like. And also, my bad, I started the wired a little bit ahead, about 15 feet ahead, but just pay attention to the speedometers, not like where we are at on the road exactly. I wasn't planning on doing this side-by-side thing, but it turns out, I think it's more useful than probably just about any other sort of race.
Ready, go. So the front end does not try to come off, and it like builds power. Like, not in like a bad way at all. The suspension is so smooth going over that bump, and it feels like it like builds power.
So I actually want to run this back and watch it in slow-mo with you. So we can see the wired bike gets the jump off the gun for sure. It is a much torquier launch, but if you keep an eye on the speedometers, you're gonna notice that the Magician Alpha kind of hits its power curve at about 10 or 15 miles per hour. It feels like a turbocharger just kicks on that bike, and it hits its power curve a little bit later. So the power and torque curve on the Magician is more smooth, but it is a very powerful bike. And then you can see these speedometers actually are about the same speed at right about 40 miles per hour. So it feels like the Magician Alpha kind of has more of like a mid-range torque and power curve, and it's a much smoother, less jarring launch. Both of these bikes are ridiculously fast, but I'd have to say, the wired Scout just feels absolutely intense. It is crazy. The Magician Alpha feels a little bit more refined and smooth.
It's good aerodynamic. Yeah, shot 47, 40, 48, 49. Woo! So let's slow it down here a bit. It's hard to put into words, but the way I feel about this bike, the Magician Alpha, this feels more like a Porsche, whereas the wired feels like a C7 Corvette Z06. Like, you get on the power, this thing is very powerful, but the torque, it doesn't hit you with like a brick of torque right off the line, which, if you're trying to pop wheelies, you're gonna want the wired because that gives you just crazy, crazy torque. If you want power, but like a manageable, more smooth power delivery, more smooth torque delivery, maybe the Alpha would be the better bike for you. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the pedal assist system. So we have it on torque sensor, and I do feel like the torque sensor on the Bafang system on this Magician Alpha feels more smooth. Like on the Alpha, I feel like I'm more encouraged to pedal this bike because like the torque sensor feels more refined on the Alpha compared to the wired Scout. Let's give it another full blast here. So the torque on the Scout is nice, but the power delivery and the silence on the Alpha is amazing. This feels like, I don't know, it's just like such a refined, smooth delivery on the power. It's a truly exceptional riding experience on the Alpha. And then to talk about the rake, the trail, the fork, whatever you want to call it, it's great, dude. Like the way you like drop into this bike, how the rear suspension sits It feels like I'm like dropping into this bike rather than kind of being like on top of it, if that makes any sense at all. So let's try this hill. Step through frame, a little bit easier to get off. Not a deal breaker one way or the other. I do really like the grips on this bike. Now obviously that you could just swap these out. You can put whatever grips you want. See, now when we talk about torque, there is no lack of torque on this bike, but if you compare it to the Wired Scout, this bike does not feel as torquey as the Wired Scout, that is for sure. So you need boost mode for the highest speed on the Alpha. Supposedly climb mode gives you a little bit more torque. I've never noticed a huge difference, honestly, but climb will limit you to 30 miles per hour. It's not like a night and day kind of thing, so we'll give this a run too. So same hill, ready, go. So front end stays down and power builds. Like, it feels like it's getting more and more power as we go a little faster. Obviously complete silence. And I feel like the handling, like I can feel it handling slightly better. And that is about 18 seconds there. So I think this one did climb that hill maybe a little bit slower. So like the absolute power difference, you know, you get a little bit more power, a little bit more torque on the Wired. But, you know, long story short, it's just like a smoother power delivery on the Alpha. And it truly makes for an exceptional electric bicycle riding experience. Although, you know, power level on this thing is just absurd compared to an electric bicycle, right? But yeah, dude, like it really encourages you to like kind of use those pedals. And the torque sensor on this, I don't know, man. I can't say enough good things about it. It's a really nice torque sensor on this bike. And then also you gotta love the on-off button for the throttle. So you could turn that off. Nice safety feature, could be used for class reasons as well. But I mean, you know, considering how powerful this bike is and how controllable and smooth and silent the power delivery is on this bike, it is a fantastic electric bike. And I guess maybe we should talk about price a little bit. The Alpha is cheaper than the Scout. I do have discount links for both of these bikes in the link below if you do make up your mind which one is for you. It'll get you the best price and help support my reviews. And of course, your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate all of your support, whether it's a like, a comment, a subscribe, or a purchase. But riding at speed, I don't know, man. It feels like you're just kind of somehow slightly a little bit more stable compared to the Wired Scout. Not that there is any instability on the Scout at all. It's just kind of like a more of like little safety blanket or something, I guess you could say. Not that you even need it per se, but the tires that come on this bike though are definitely much more suitable for trail riding. It has more of like a flat patch on it. More so than like a rounded edge tire. Yeah, so dude, it's like, I mean, the Wired is just an absolute hooligan. I mean, it's the front end just like ready to rip off the ground. This, I don't know, man. I wish you could experience both bikes for yourself if you're trying to make up your mind. But the bottom line is the Alpha is just so much more smooth and quiet and refined. I guess you could say like slower speed maneuvers, the Alpha feels like you're in more control of it. You're in like less danger of like throwing yourself off the bike because the torque is less, but the power builds as you get into the throttle. So I don't ever feel like the front end's trying to lift off the ground, and it also feels powerful at the same time. It's torquey, but it's not like the back end's kicking out and you're doing drifting and burning out kind of torque. Instead, you get on the throttle, you feel the power, it's smooth, it's delivering the power, it's building on the power, and right now it is showing 4,200 watts on there, easily getting up to low 40s and a pretty strong headwind here, and it just feels real stable, man. Like both hands on the bars at all times on both these bikes, dude. This is a great electric bike, bro. And so is the Wired Scout. They are both freaking awesome. It's like if you're looking to buy an electric bike 2026, I mean, we're just really fortunate to be in a place right now where we have absolutely amazing bikes coming to the market at reasonable prices. So as mentioned, Magician Alpha, this is the less expensive of the two, and I have a discount link for both these bikes down below the video. If you have any specific questions, I know I didn't answer every single thing about these bikes in this video, drop a comment down below. I'll try and get back to you. I would say, you know, no matter what bike you get, you're gonna be happy with and you're gonna love. I mean, you will, but I do feel like there is a right bike for the right person, you know? I mean, if you're really looking for like the unhinged, extreme of the extreme, the Wired Scout is probably gonna be the better bike for you. If you want that more refined, smooth power delivery that feels a little bit more like an electric bicycle than a straight up, you know, insane motorcycle, then, you know, maybe the Alpha is for you. So the bottom line is, doesn't really matter to me which bike you get. I just want you to get the bike that's right for you. And if you have made up your mind, use that link down below the video, buy through that link, get the best price and support my reviews, and I appreciate your support. So that's about it. Yeah, drop a comment, let me know which bike's right for you, what is your opinion, any questions you have, and thanks for watching the video, dudes. I'll catch you next time.